Hello everybody and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. In my last few updates, I talked a lot about why I believe that this is the final dip that we're going to see before our big alt season takes place, and why this is the last dip that we're going to get to be able to accumulate those cheap positions before that big run into new all-time highs actually happens. Today, we're looking at the market bouncing. Everything in the charts is playing out exactly as we needed it to. All of our weekly levels have held, and I am even more confident that the market is moments away from confirming this reversal and heading into new all-time highs. Today, I'm going to break down all of the most important charts that you guys need to see so that it can calm your guys' fears and concerns and know exactly what to expect and how to play the market moving forward from here. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you find any value in this video, please do me a favor. Hit that like, comment, and subscribe button. Without further ado, let's jump right into this amazing video today. Here we are jumping into today's video, and really the thing that I've been most focused on is really the 100K level for Bitcoin. This is what I felt was kind of the decision maker inside of this cycle, where I felt like if we break below 100K, that could very easily signal the bigger portion of the bear market decline to follow. So I've been kind of watching to see how this market would play out. For me, it was always bullish above 100K. However, if we started to break down, reject, make resistance below 100, at that point I would be looking to actually take a little bit of some selling precautions just to make sure that we're going to be okay. You know what I mean? One of the worst things that you can do is be late to the cycle, understanding that we're so close to the ending of the 4-year cycle timeframes, and then, giving the opportunity to sell at a relative high and then just not doing it. That's going to end up seeing you cost your entire portfolio as this thing drags all the way back down to nothing. But really the big thing that we've been watching for the most part is right around this 109K level. And this is a very important weekly level because this is kind of the higher high that we've been maintaining for a while now. We've rejected off this level a number of times, and then it was really most recently into July that we finally broke above. We've been just kind of chopping around both support and resistance of this range, not really getting a confirmational move one way or another. But you guys can see that when we started to reject up here, we started to spill lower. We had 2 wicks that came actually below the support level, and 109K was starting to look like resistance. But as you guys can tell, on our weekly close, the candle bodies never actually broke below that level, and we're actually starting to see a green buyback taking us right back on top of that same level once more. So when I'm looking at this chart, as of right now, nothing is broken in our market structure. We're still range bound in between this range and this range. We're still just ping-ponging. So as of right now, nothing's changed with the greater trend of Bitcoin. We're still just holding the same support levels that we were before. But for me, the most important thing, if you're trying to draw a line in the sand, I'm looking at 100K. For me, if we lose 100K, that really tells the story that this higher picture trend of us actually making this uptrend, higher highs, higher lows, really just continuing on in the trend that we've been at. If we started to lose 100K, I do think that the cracks are there to actually just tell us, hey, maybe this is the top. Maybe we are going to have a much longer sell-off. Because, guys, the big thing that we need to be aware of is the fact that our 4-year cycle is right there at the ending of it. If we're looking at where our cycle lows are, every single cycle low basically being 4 years from the last, we're right there at the very ending of this topping point, considering all of our prior cycles, if we're drawing from the bottom of the cycle to the top, have been about 1,064 days. If we're looking at where we're at today to where we're at right now, we're right there at the exact same time frames for a cycle top. So if we're looking at based off of the 3 years up, 1 year down, technically speaking, this cycle is over, and we're right there at the point in which we need to be looking to take profits, scale out of our positions, and move on to the next thing. So that's the thing that we're watching for. Are we going to get that kind of final run that's going to take place? Are we going to get one more final move to kind of give us that blow off top before this cycle is over? Or is the market just going to kind of peel back up from right here, lose that 100K level? And if we were to reject and we were to break down from 100K and kind of retest that level and reject further, at that point, this is really where you could draw the conclusion that this bull market has topped. And once we started to lose 100K and reject and make lower highs from there, at that point, I would be looking to exit out of my positions and really just target, a much deeper correction back down. I don't find it as likely that that's the case. If we do see a bear market and the top is already had, and we're basically looking at 126K top, at that point, we're probably not going to see, the full 70-80% correction in the bear market. We'd probably come back around 50-60%, coming back around these prior range highs, even back where we were consolidating at around, the breakout of that all-time high. I wouldn't be surprised if it's just kind of a slow, dragged out kind of choppy price action as the market does something like that. Maybe not the same 70-80% bear market decline that we've been expected to see, accustomed to seeing. Might be a little bit more slow, drawn out, sideways, choppy price action as we only go down about 50 to 60%. That's kind of my scenario for how I'm playing this bear market. I think that with the institutions involved, I think that that's the most likely scenario if in fact we are to top. But I'm still leaning towards the potential that this has one more final move in us before that true cycle top sets in. So these are the two scenarios that I see. Really, guys, what I'm watching for the bearish scenario is really right around this 100K region. If we lose that, I'm going to be looking to jump out of the markets. However, if the market continues to hold this weekly support like we've been at, I don't see any reason why this can't V bottom and start that reversal. But to be honest, what we really want to see out of this correction is a V bottom and a big reversal like this. We don't really want to see us chopping around very much longer because, in my opinion, being so close to the ending of the 4-year cycle timeframes, the more that we just sit here and chop around, the more that I'm looking at this as being somewhat of a rounded top type price action before we do inevitably get that breakdown. But those are the two scenarios, guys. I mean, it's really simple. We're either going to continue to hold the support and trend up and finish out this last move, or we're going to continue to show weakness and break down and actually lose this support level. If we lose support, the obvious trade is that we're going to move into shorts. We're going to be looking into cash. We're going to be looking that this bear market is going to last a whole nother year from now. However, as long as support continues to hold like it is right now, I don't see a scenario that is telling us that it's impossible we can't have one more final blow off top, considering that's how all of the prior cycles have played out. Even in the last cycle with this blow off top being kind of minuscule, that's something that we have historically seen. So the question is whether we're going to continue to see that, whether this is a big shifting point in the market, and you guys know that my line in the sand is really going to be around 100K, so that's what I'm watching for. But as of right now, guys, kind of the thing that leads me to have a lot more confidence in the market is still, once again, Ethereum. Because if we're going to see altcoins run, it's going to revolve around whatever Ethereum does. And as of right now, Ethereum is still holding that same support level. If we're looking at the line in the sand for ETH, we never broke down from that. Even if this big sell-off that we've had, if we jump into the shorter time frames of that sell-off, I was mapping out how I believe that this is the same fractal as basically Bitcoin through COVID. What I mean by that, if we go over here and look at Bitcoin through COVID, this is kind of what I mean. Ethereum is following the same pattern here, where you have the run-up, the peak, you kind of get this choppy price action, follow the support, fake breakout of the downtrend, and then that leads us into that final bear trap right here. Now, if we're looking at that in comparison with ETH is doing it not only on the larger time frame indicated right here, but it's also doing it in the shorter time frame. And in my last video, I talked about why I believe that this was going to be that capitulation, how we pretty much just saw the same pattern, follow the support, fake breakout, and this is the big capitulation. Now, we've retested that level, we've held it, and we're getting continuation. So in my opinion, this thing is about to V-bottom. It's going to come all the way back up to this $800 resistance, and ETH is going to break out of this. I've been calling it for a long time. I still believe firmly that Ethereum is going to be running for one more new all-time high, and it's really revolving around this line in the sand, around this 4K region. Because guys, as of right now, if we're looking at this on a weekly time frame, we had all of this big selling that came in here. Notice these big wicks. Big wick here, big wick right here, big wick right here. We had 3 massive wicks that came through, one of them coming all the way back down into $3,400. Yet if you notice, the candle bodies all closed back above this same weekly resistance level, as indicated by new support. So instead of this rejecting and falling lower like we've done every single time, even going all the way back to the last cycle, right in here, we've rejected off of this level virtually every time we've hit it. Now that we're finally retesting that level, we've had 3 big liquidations trying to get us actually below that level, only holding as new support. That tells me and gives me a lot of confidence that this thing is moments away from making that big reversal and running up for one more big move. I've been calling it for a long time. This same cycle over here for Bitcoin, how Bitcoin just coiled inside of this triangle. Once we got that breakout outside of that downtrending resistance, that was where the big push into new all-time highs took place for Bitcoin. And what we're looking at with Ethereum really isn't any different. This is pretty much the same market structure as before. If we remove this drawing tool and kind of look in here, we're seeing the same structure. Nothing has changed in here. It's all virtually the same type of formation. Big triangle formation. We've been coiling. Right after that big COVID-like breakdown, that big liquidation event, we got that breakout, and we're just retesting it as new support. The same thing happened over here. After that capitulation, we rallied into a breakout of the downtrending resistance. Once we retested that support, we got into that new all-time high breakout. The same thing is taking place right now in Ethereum. There is virtually no difference in the charts, and that's what gives me a lot of confidence just to ignore the FUD, right? Everything that we need to see for Bitcoin is happening. Yes, we've kind of lagged up here. Yes, we've just kind of chopped around for the last few months, not really doing much. But at the same way, the weekly support has held. All of our weekly levels are holding. Price is yet to break down, confirm a lower low or a lower high. Everything right up in here is just virtually consolidation moving sideways. So it's really easy to play the game. We're either going to see one more final flush, a rejection that takes us back below 100K, which in my opinion, that would kind of signal that the bear market is in full swing. The time frames are already flashing that we need to be selling. So based off the 4-year cycle, we know that we're ready to be selling. We're ready to get out of the market. Even if you haven't made a bunch of money, even if you're sitting in altcoins that haven't moved, when Bitcoin tops, it doesn't matter whether your altcoins didn't move in the bull cycle. They will go lower and you will lose all your money. So even salvaging what you can inside of altcoin positions that haven't moved, when Bitcoin tops from its cycle top, even taking those losses on the altcoins that haven't moved is going to be a good thing, because in hindsight, a year from now, when we're targeting Bitcoin back down around 50K approximately, that's an opportunity for us to be able to take that cash and buy back into Bitcoin, buy back into the, the serious assets that are going to stick around, because we don't know what the altcoins are going to do. I still lean towards the belief that Bitcoin is going to have one more final go at this. I lean towards that belief because Ethereum is still holding such great support, had this big liquidation, and we've still done nothing besides hold this weekly resistance as new support, massive support and resistance flip. So the idea that Ethereum makes one more final push, I find it likely. And during that move, it's also likely that Bitcoin is going to follow it. So if Bitcoin's going to be following it, they're both going to rally together. We're going to end up seeing a lot of this money recirculate. And I do think that altcoins will have a chance to run. The question is, how high are they going to actually run? Because if we come over here and look at Bitcoin dominance, I think that this is a really important chart to finish up with. When we're looking at Bitcoin dominance, we already had that big drop, right? But we ended up finding a support down in here. We're getting this kind of rounded bottom. And during that liquidation, we had that big wick that came up and actually retested up here at about 63.5%. I wouldn't be surprised to see this creep back up here, even coming back up to these range highs. And we might be looking at something similar to what we saw in the last cycle. Because here's the thing, guys. In the last cycle, Bitcoin was rallying. It was doing its thing. But altcoins were outperforming it as Bitcoin was first starting to break out of the COVID dip. And then it was right after that COVID dip that we ended up seeing Bitcoin rally into a new all-time high and really steal the spotlight from all the altcoins. As Bitcoin dominance was rocketing back up into a new high, we actually saw a lot of people capitulating the altcoins, and that's what always happens. Bitcoin will lead the cycle into new all-time highs, and it's bleeding altcoins. Altcoins aren't doing anything, and then it's at the very peak point of that fear inside of the altcoin market that we end up seeing that reversion and the market tips back over. Looking at the current cycle today, I'm curious to see how it's going to play out, because we've already kind of seen this short-term sell-off, like maybe what we saw over in here. And as Bitcoin is now sitting in new all-time highs, ETH looks like it's going to break out. I'm not going to be surprised if this Bitcoin dominance picks back up, at least back up to this range high. Maybe we only hit 62%, same place with the wick before we fall. But I'm not going to be surprised to see this market start to turn back up as Bitcoin leads into new all-time highs. Ethereum isn't going to have this big breakout unless Bitcoin leads it. So Bitcoin's the driver value. If we're going to see this move happen here, the final blow off top, then at that point, it's going to drag Ethereum up with it, and you're going to see Ethereum start to rocket. As both of those are doing their thing, I'm not going to be surprised if in the short term, Bitcoin dominance creeps back up as Bitcoin's leading the charge. And then inevitably, we're going to see that rotation take place. And eventually, this thing is going to fall to at least 45%, 47%, potentially back down to this 40% region. Those are going to be the two take profits for the altcoins moving forward. That's the way I'm playing the market. It's very simple, very straightforward. We might see some Bitcoin outperformance in the short term like we've been accustomed to seeing in years past. Bitcoin's still holding support. Everything we need to see there is playing out. Ethereum is still holding support. Everything we need to see there is playing out. Really the only thing we're waiting for is whenever this starts to tip over and make that secondary lower low. Because the second that happens is when alt season takes place. And I think it's a very encouraging sign that Ethereum is actually holding this big breakout, because that is what's given me the encouragement that we're going to actually see that money rotate into these altcoins. So guys, this is the video I had for you. Wanted to break it down, make sure that we're covering all of our bases, talking about the potential cycle top, talking about the coming bear market, what my opinion is, whether I think that we're topped or whether we have upside to come. You guys now know what I'm thinking, how I'm going to play the market. So if you guys did find value, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos. If you guys want to see anything that I'm buying, selling, trading over the rest of the cycle and when I take profits, links are in the description to go ahead and sign up for my private group. You're going to be able to get lifetime access as long as I'm running this channel and really investing into any financial market, whether it's crypto or something else. You guys are going to be able to copy and follow along with me. So if you guys want to check that out, links are in the description. With that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. As always, peace out.